Hello and welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from today. Welcome back here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome back to another exciting conversation that's been quite a few months in the making, but finally we managed to get Jonathan Carney on the show together with all our Light 'em Up family and friends. Hopefully there's a lot of people from the LFD fan community joining us from the Discord channel, but we'll talk about all of that. First of all, let's get things straight. Let's get things organized. Jonathan Carney, Vice President of La Flor Dominicana. Welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge, and thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. I'm super happy we managed to get this on the way.
Great to be here. I've been watching and participating this behind the scenes for several years now since you've got this off the ground, and it's been great to watch this grow into something that's really respected in the industry. And it seems like everybody has a great time doing it too. I've never heard anybody regret it on the back end. So I'm excited to be here.
That's very kind. Thank you so much for the warm words. That's lovely to hear. John, off the record, you told me where you are today. We see a lot of lovely booze behind you. I'm sure there's plenty of nice cigars around you as well. But where are you? Where are you joining us from for everybody out there?
So I currently live in Winter Park, Florida. My office is down in Miami, Coral Gables, where our domestic headquarters here is in the United States. So Winter Park is in the middle of the state of Florida. It's just north of Orlando. So we're in Disney World country, but I'm at a very unique retail lounge for a couple specific reasons. I'm here at Cigars on the Avenue in Winter Park, Florida. They just moved about a year and a half ago to this beautiful, I'd say it's about a 3,500 to 4,000 square foot cigar bar space in downtown Winter Park. The humidor is actually on the other side of the wall behind me here. I am not in the actual bar portion. I'm in the liquor storage room. I thought that was a beautiful backdrop with all of that there. But
Absolutely.
The other thing that's very special about this account, specifically for LFD, is this is the home of the Golden NFT number 7. So this was the number 7 owner of the Golden NFT, and they're going to be actually launching it. I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, and we can do a little tour of the store as we get into this too. But they're going to be launching their NFT, which is dubbed Lucky Number 7, on March 9th of this year. So that's getting close, but they've been setting things aside, and they've got a really cool concept. As I said, we'll get into that a little more. But yeah, I'm at one of the more unique shops in the country. A place that I've been coming to for years, and since they moved it to a cigar bar, it's been great. And it coincidentally is only about a half a mile down the street from my house, so also incredibly convenient.
That's convenient. John, before we dive into the whole Golden Bull, the NFT topics, and some of the more recent developments around LFD, what I'm curious to understand and learn is we both share a background in hospitality around the food and drinks industry, and I'm curious to learn how, in your humble opinion, not only do those two industries come together, but what were some of the key takeaways that you have taken and translated over from the world of hospitality, welcoming people to a restaurant, a bar, and take some of that inspiration, take some of that culture into the cigar industry?
So yeah, I grew up in the restaurant business. My family owned 3 restaurants from the time I was born. My dad got started in, probably the mid to late 70s. He started a small seasonal business. For those that are from the Northeastern United States, there's this concept referred to as a dairy bar. It's essentially an ice cream stand that serves burgers, fries. Coincidentally, we still to this day, even though we're not in the restaurant business anymore, have a secret family onion ring recipe that the recipe's on lock and key. And it actually is. My dad has asked me several times. He's had a few people that were interested in the recipe, and he said, I got to ask my son first. So my sister and I kind of own the rights to that. I don't know if it'll be worth anything, but it's an excellent onion ring. But I grew up in that, started working in that industry when I was about 8 or 9 years old. My father would put me on dishwashing duty on Sundays when my mom was at church in the evenings, because we spent time Sunday night together. And he put me on dishwashing duty when it got busy, and I started annoying him, I'm sure. So I started as a dishwasher, and then worked through the restaurants as I grew up. My first official job with our business was when I was 12. I was assistant line cook at the seasonal restaurant, so I was making burgers, fries. And if anyone follows me on Instagram, which is unique, culinary is big in this industry, but I think Lito himself is probably one of the ones that's best known for his cooking. If you've ever been to the Dominican Republic, to our factory, we have outdoor kitchens. We have a special indoor kitchen as well. So the culinary side that I have was something that was unique that connected with Lito when I started with the company 13 years ago. We've done a lot of fun little projects over the years, independently. For example, Lito and I started dry aging meat about 6 or 7 years ago on our own, because we were on a trip. We started talking about it, and I'm like, we should do this at home. So about a month or so passed, and we're talking on the phone, and I was like, hey, I got to tell you, I started dry aging meat at my house. He's like, Carney, I've been meaning to call you up and tell you that as well. He's like, I've been dry aging now for like 2 months. I bought a new refrigerator for the garage. So it's been unique on a personal level. On a professional level, when I started in the industry 10 or 12 years ago, there was kind of not a resurgence, I wouldn't say, but there was definitely a trend in this industry of lounges and the cigar experience for the consumer getting much more high end and nicer. I'm not just saying in terms of price, even moderately priced experiences were elevated. There's endless amounts of new lounges opening up, or lounges that are renovating, making them nicer. This, for example, is one of them. But there's countless every day there. People are starting construction or expanding, and the retail environment has certainly improved. And I would say the retail environment and the consumer environment on the hospitality industry is significantly improved too. And the reason why, and I feel that, is that the consumers, as I am as well, we know what we like. We're better educated on the product. We have a better connection with the product. And when you have that, your expectations are elevated. And it's been, the responsibility of retail outlets, lounges, and restaurants and hospitality business to improve those experiences. So I think that's been the biggest connection that I've seen. And it's increased year to year over the last decade. Whereas right now you're starting to see, I think, nearly everyone elevate what their experience is. And if they're not, they're being left behind, and the consumers are very knowledgeable in what their expectations are.
I mean, as a very, I wouldn't just dare calling it like a recent phenomenon, but something that truly over the past couple of years has become even more obvious and prominent is the gap is widening in all various segments, businesses, society, whatever, right? And it feels like you almost have to decide whether you want to play in the luxury sphere, or you're going to go more towards the budget side of things, because the middle is just drying up. Is that also an observation that you have made in that regard?
Well, I agree with you, yes, but I think so let's just break it down, because the easiest way to look at it is to go from price points, right? So if you look at a lower price point of an experience, a mid-level experience, or a high-end experience, all of those are a lot better than what they used to be. They've all had to elevate.
So, yeah.
So you look at I look at here in the United States, like casual restaurant chains, which is, for example, you have here Olive Gardens, Red Lobsters, places like that. And then other competitors, Chili's, things like that. Those places have been forced to get better as well. Now, they're not my ideal places to eat, but you do go in and they have different experiences. They may have a flight of margaritas, that are featuring a high-end tequila, or they have, a flight of wine or a wine tasting. So even moderate levels of experience have really increased too. And I think the biggest challenge that exists is when you jump to a very high-end luxury experience, price becomes a major factor, which is where I think cigars, especially high-end premium cigars, have a really competitive edge over high-end dining, because high-end dining is not always accessible. Spending $400 to $500 on dinner is not a commonplace thing for the vast majority of people. So you can sit and have a very high-end premium cigar, for $10, $15, $20. And that period lasts over the same period you would have that high-end dining experience. So I think cigars have a unique advantage over other industries that are experiencing this, because you can have that high-end experience but not have to spend the high-end dollar like you would have to spend in some other industries.
That's an excellent point. And also, I mean, closely linked to that, cigars in general have such a base democratic effect of it. It brings us all together, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter the disposable income that you have, right? We come together over a humble cigar. We enjoy the culture. We enjoy everything around it. And we're all equal, right? And funnily enough, when I think about the hospitality industry and the bar industry, for example, where I had a lot of experience throughout my professional career, it's sort of a similar thing. Yes, you will always have those products that bring with it a certain feel of social stratification, and the guy who's only drinking his super expensive Bordeaux wines and his single malt Scotch whiskeys that need to have a certain price tag and a certain label on it, similar to certain people that gravitate towards, the cigar ring and whatever it shows and a certain brand. But at the core, those things are such wonderful uniting elements and such wonderful products that bring us together, and that's what fascinates me about them, and sort of always kept me coming back to that wonderful industry, and the people therein are a true testament to that.
Yeah, the parallels between the two are very similar, because it's transitioned over the years in premium cigars. For example, you used to be able to smoke everywhere, even in over in Europe, there was places where you could smoke. And here in the States, and same thing over there, is what birthed the modern day cigar lounge and the modern day cigar experience. Really, it was smoking regulations, because it forced places to churn into something that they could deliver a service that you couldn't get anywhere. You used to go to your favorite steakhouse and have a nice cigar at the end of dinner, or you'd smoke at at any restaurant or any cafe, anything like that. So it really forced the initial elevation of it was forced by regulations, and then it's been driven by consumers and driven by the demand for an experience. And as I said, even in countries that experience very high taxation on premium cigar and other tobacco products, the value of that time is unmatched. For example, I don't know if there's anyone in here from Canada, but where I'm from northern Maine originally, so I'm very close to Quebec. And I mean, it's wildly expensive over there. The taxes are over 100%. However, if you do grab a cigar and it happens to be priced more, it's still over a period of 2 hours, the value that you're getting from that is unmatched. And again, something that's just truly special and unique, which I don't think has in the restaurant business. I don't think you necessarily have that unless you're at the very high end of it. So you can use and and consume any level of premium cigar and have that same experience that anyone's having at any price point that they're deciding to spend or able to spend. So it's a really special industry. It's a really special experience, and that's why for me, even when I live and breathe cigars. You know, people. My wife drives my wife nuts. She's like, "Oh, you're always smoking. You're always at the lounge." And I was like, "Well, you know what? You picked your job. I picked mine." And and if you don't, you know, maybe you should have considered that 10 years ago. You know, this is just something I personally love because after I'm done working, I enjoy the same camaraderie that I had while I was working.
Yeah. But you know, you probably didn't know that before you entered the industry full time. What was it that pulled you into the world of cigars in the first place?
So when I first started smoking cigars was in the early 2000s. It was probably 2003. I went to college here in Orlando at the University of Central Florida. It's actually the second largest school here in the United States for college. And Orlando has a really well-known retailer. I'm sure most of you have heard about it. Corona Cigars in Orlando. They truly are the Disney World of cigars. It's an easy comparison because they're. By the way, I can't get over how much Brian Julian looks like Simon Pegg right now. Just from the behind, I keep looking, and you're right in the center of mine. So I'm like Simon Pegg is here, man.
Thank you. I think, is that a compliment, Simon Pegg? I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's funny.
Yeah. So I started smoking at Corona Cigars. So I was introduced to a wide range of different products. When I first started, we were smoking CAO. CAO was the go-to. His retail store used to have like 400 SKUs of CAO as soon as you walked in the building. So his business was growing at the same time that I was getting started in the industry. And I've lived down here in Orlando for probably 15 of the last 20 years. So it's my smoking's grown with that on a very social level. And you have a lot of tourism here and a lot of people from different areas. A lot of cigar cigar influencers, cigar factory manufacturers that are traveling through town, cigar celebrities, for a lack of better terms. And it was just fun to be around it. So it grew. And I was like, this is something that's really unique. Now, outside of that retail experience, I had no idea that there was careers to be had on this side of it. Because I got started as a sales rep. I was that for about a year and a half, and I've been in this position for about 10 and a half years as the vice president of sales. But the transition from a sales rep, which I didn't think was an actual job, to transitioning to this position, which my family didn't think was an actual job, was quite rewarding. And doing it with a company that was very reputable at the time as well, and has grown to be a staple in one of the more recognizable brands in the industry is unique. So when I got started with LFD, they had only been in business for about 15 years. When we celebrate our 30th anniversary in about a year and a half, 2 years, I will have been with them for half the time they were in business. So to go from something I didn't know existed to then spend that amount of time it was certainly unexpected.
It's quite remarkable, to be honest, and that's also something that I think speaks volumes to your personality, your character, and just people who spend that much time with the company. The loyalty that it shows is something very special, and it's not as common these days anymore as it probably used to be in the past, when people, when you started with the company, there was a certain chance that you would retire from that company many years further down the road. But today, with the young generation, I believe, thinking differently about things, and us not giving that same, I wouldn't dare say energy, but the same loyalty to the things that we have around us. I mean, if something's broken in your life, you just leave it and move on and search for the next best thing, instead of trying to work on it and make things better, make it improve, and invest some time and energy to it.
Yeah, so the premium cigar business on our side, and we're different than a lot of just brands that are out there. I'm sure Lito's spoken this on here, but if you haven't heard it, I mean, we're truly a manufacturer from the top down. Not only is it the brand, we own the distribution channels here in the United States, the manufacturing facility in the Dominican Republic, the agricultural side of it. So to have all of those pieces in house in one place creates a different environment than just simply owning a brand. There's tons of brands out there, but there's just a handful of serious manufacturers and then agricultural growers at the same time. But this isn't really a traditional, a traditional industry in the way that we look at how corporate businesses are run, big businesses and small independently owned businesses. This is traditional in the sense that it's a traditional craft that's churned into something that's, again, I'd say on the business side is the same level that we talked at the consumer experience. The business side of these industries has really been elevated over the last decade at the same time too, because there's a lot of tradition that goes into this and making this product. But when you have tradition, there's a lot of old ways, and I would say there's been a lot of improvement on that too. But with that, at the same time, if you're looking at, I have a lot of people ask me, how do you get into the cigar business, or what is a job, or what does your day look like? I mean, this is not the traditional corporate 9 to 5. This is not the board meetings, executive suite. Our company, for example, is a husband and wife that are the presidents, and then it's me and Tony, and the next generation of Lito Jr. is on the way. So to have that in a industry like this is not the traditional approach that you would see with different industries.
I know for a fact, though, that the business side of things is something you have a very keen interest on. You mentioned it on a recent show and a recent interview in particular, and that's probably something not that many people are aware of, and in particular for the end consumer, it's probably not always as visible, but so critically important, right? And it's very nice and fine and dandy to talk about the mythical and the beautiful things in the industry, the tobacco and all the magic that goes around the blending and stuff. But a lot of it has to do with business implications behind that as well, impacting certain decisions you make in regards to the releases that are coming up, and just future perspectives and where you want to take the company. How do you think about that, and what are some of the things there that you find most fascinating in how they come together, like the romantic side, right, and then the nitty-gritty of the business end?
Yeah, that's a great topic. So for us, the fact that we're small in terms of the structure of the business, in terms of ownership and where decisions are made, it creates ability for us when we do make business decisions to implement them quickly. But also at the time that it's smaller, you then have a smaller group of people that are making the decisions. And if one or two don't agree out of the 4 or 5 or whoever's making the decision, it creates a different dynamic, especially when you're dealing directly with ownership and family. For example, you look here in the States, General Cigar Company is the largest premium cigar distributor in our country. And one of the Carney should never describe he and Tony as small. Trust me, we won't. Neither of us. Well, I know you're not getting. I'm almost 300 pounds, and Tony's 6'8". But no, I would say for us, the biggest challenge I do have with this is the fact that we're a small family-owned company, and I don't say that negatively. I just say that creates a unique set of challenges because you have 2 entities. So essentially, you have the business side, which is the finance, the distribution, accounts receivable, payable, managing our sales force, managing sales expectations and goals and quotas for the year. And then you have the production side, which is really the fun part of it, creating products. And Lito and Tony very much handle that. I have a hand in certain things. Over the years, I've had a good amount of involvement in our TAA, our Tobacconists Association of America projects. and the exclusive series we've done for them and how we manage that. But I will say the bigger the business, the more group is involved in making a decision. I know that doesn't seem to make sense, but if you have one person at the top that's a CEO and this is direction we're going, then you have 10 people below, then you got 10 people following it, correct? If you have two owners, one owner makes a decision, the other owner makes a decision, the vice president of sales makes a decision, and then the vice president of production and Tony makes a decision, and we're all doing our different projects. And then when you bring them together, you realize, all right, how do we make all four different directions that we're going in work as one? Now, the luxury is you can do those things separately and independently from each other and bring them together, and then you make the best decision quickly. But I will say that sometimes one person thinks the other person is doing something the other way, or there's an expectation of this person was doing this person's doing that, and then nobody was doing it, or they were all doing something independent from each other. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge, is to take four independent thinkers and bring them together to one focused vision. Now, luckily, we have a character and a chef of premium cigars in Lido. So there is one vision and one image with that. But to create one image, it's not always one view. So I tell people that, you go out to a famous chef's restaurant, and there's a lot of chefs below that are putting together great ideas and great projects that go to the top to that chef. So that's the biggest challenge, is getting all those things working together and synchronizing at the same time.
Who's driving that process in the majority of the instances? Because I find that interesting. On the show, when we talk to manufacturers or brand owners, there's all various perspectives on how you start a new concept, a new cigar line, a new blend. Sometimes it's purely ego driven, where you say, like, this is a cigar that I would love to smoke, or this is a tobacco that I want to work with. Other times you probably look at it from a business angle and think of, is there a void in the market that we try to fill? Where does it come from for you, or do you change? And sometimes it's one input, sometimes it's the other.
So we're dealing with a smaller piece of the whole overall pie. So I think when you're working with a smaller group, that you can focus on essentially setting your own destiny, I would say, or setting your own course that you want to follow. So for us, last year we made probably 4.5 million cigars, which was about a 20% increase. And that took several years to grow where we could have that type of growth. And we should experience that again next year and the next year after that. And then it'll settle in and we will kind of regroup to see where we go in terms of growth after that. So we're not beholden to stockholders, shareholders, people that have an interest in it. So this doesn't have to be this drive for growth. Really where it's been focused has been on the drive and quality and challenging ourselves to the next level. And that really does come from Lido and Inez. And I think the people that have been most successful, and a reason why I've been here a period of time, is I personally challenged myself quite a bit as well. And I'm the hardest critic on myself. But Lido and Inez, you come up with a great idea and say, how can we make it better? And I know it's because Lido does the same thing to himself. I had a great idea. This is excellent. How can I make it better? And how can I be better than I was the year before? And it's not financially driven. It really is driven off the product. And I know, some people, I've heard that said all the time, but, if there's people experiencing massive, massive growth year after year, you're not just driven strictly by quality. You're being driven by, a financial interest, which is not wrong. And your goal is to try to maximize that profit and that, that revenue at the same time as you're trying to maintain the quality the best you can. But that's not been our driving factor. And, I said Lido and Inez really challenged that. There's many retailers that do business with us. And I'm sure if you're an LFD smoker, sometimes some of the cigars you want aren't just readily available because the demand is high and the supply is what it is. And the reason for that is so we can sit and have this conversation. And I can tell you that with a straight face, and Lido can say it with a straight face, that the quality and consistency is what drives the future and trying to continue to be as best as we can. So that challenge comes from the top. and it trickles down. But I think we all instill that in us, and I look for that when we're looking at bringing people onto our team, and that's the one real driving point I think, and really the platform for what the company stands on.
There's a question from Steve in the audience. Steve, welcome and thanks for chiming in.
Hey everyone. I had a question about the chisel. I know you guys have a patent on it, and I'm just curious what the story behind it is and the best way to cut it, because I've heard different things before.
Steve, how are you, my friend? Good to see you.
Good.
So the chisel, yeah, there is a patent and a trademark on the name. That was an effort that Lido had been trying for over 10 years when that was finally approved. I believe that patent was officially approved in 2013 or 2014, and it was retroactive to 2006, which is when he proved, which by the way, it's quite amazing to patent a shape of something. If you had said to me today, someone's going to try to patent a shape of a cigar or whatnot, I'd be that's insane. How do you prove something like that? And Lido was able to do it, and it really came about in a simple way. So the chisel is essentially a square press torpedo, figurado. Whenever I describe it, I always squeeze the cigar I'm smoking for some reason, if it's going to make it make more sense. See what I mean? So it's square pressed. So how it went down is I believe he was driving in his car. He was coming from the factory or going to the farm or vice versa. And I don't know what was going on, because he doesn't traditionally chew on his cigars, but he was biting on the cigar, having a discussion. And over a period of about a half hour or so, he pulled the cigar to his mouth, and he was like, man, this is a really unique shape. And the draw on it had changed. The way that the air was pulling through the cigar had changed. And whoever he was riding with, he was like, when we get back to the factory, we got to try to make this shape. I've never even seen anything like it. And they went back, they made a few samples of it, and then the chisel was born. It looked like a chisel. So that's where it got the name. That was when it was born. And then he went on the process of trying to protect what he created. And in 2013, that was granted by the U.S. Department of Patents, and the trademark of the name went through, and it was retroactive to 2006. And the thing that's fascinating to me on patenting a cigar shape, pardon me for a second, I've been hacking and coughing for the last 3.5 weeks since the Christmas sickness. And I believe there's a lot of people that have experienced that too, but the cigars seem to be helping. The thing with patenting a shape is you're gonna have documentation to patent anything. So the forward thinking that he took to start collecting data on the time that he created it, when he created it, you can't just say, hey, I made this then, and that's the proof. You have to have evidence of it. So the body of work that he collected from 2004, 5, 6, all the way to 2013, when he was trying and was finally granted that patent with the chisel, is quite amazing when you think about it. And it's these cigar companies are, they're in countries that are developing nations, some in third world countries, and there's not necessarily a paper trail all the time, even on how many cigars are getting made, let alone on how you're developing a product or making a shape or that. So that was the unique part to me, is the amount of evidence and proof and documentation that he was able to put together about how this was developed, which makes it even more challenging too, because if someone wanted to test test the patent and say, hey, well, since you're making a chisel, you just made a shape, well, they have to prove it, and nobody has that type of documentation on something like that. So it's quite fascinating that he was forward thinking on that from the time that he made it to being like, this is something that I want to protect, and over a decade collected and saved the information for that. That blows my mind. Now, Steve, in relation to cutting it, I just simply pinch it. So if you have these two flat sides here, I just pinch the side and it pops the cap right off. If you like the draw to be a little looser, you can straight cut it perpendicular, or you can do it horizontal with it. Some people recently have been doing V cuts straight across the flat side. And then the most famous has been taking a deeper punch and punching the flat sides of the chisel, the top and the bottom, right through the binder and sometimes through the filler, which redirects, each one of those redirects the smoke on a different part of your palate, changing the mouthfeel that you would get and where that flavor is going to hit your palate each time.
Just curious, has anyone ever tried to infringe on the trademark or the patent?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Multiple times. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to name names and go out there, but there's I'd say probably 4 or 5 times a year, there's something that pops up. There was one recently I'd say in August or September of this past year. It was funny. They were actually 2 booths over from us at the Premium Cigar Association trade show. And the cigar was called El Abuelo Chisel, which was funny because El Abuelo was a trademark which was owned by Dave Garofalo. And then it was also called the Chisel and in the chisel shape. And Dave and Lito went over to talk to the guy at the same time. And the guy ended up like getting happy and took a picture with him. And they were like, I don't know if he fully understood what we were talking to him about. And I was like, well, I go, you're polite, and that's a legal side of it. And we really respect other people's patents and trademarks too. But I was like, I'm sure he understood when they got some paperwork later on about what it was. But that was the most recent. And usually it's an honest mistake. People don't really understand. They see it. Or you have there's rollers that jump around the different factories. So somebody may work in the factory and not fully understand how a patent works. And they go and say, hey, there's a new factory opens up somewhere, and they go in and I can make this chisel shape and this flat box pressed, figurado, and then all of a sudden it goes out on the market, and then you've got you have a trademark concern.
Well, can I chime in here too? So I'm curious then, what if a brand made the same shape but just gave it a different name? Because like nobody owns Churchill, or is that's taboo as well if they just called it something else?
So the trademark is on the name and variations of the name, and then the patent is on the physical shape.
Wow,
Physical
cool.
shape itself. Yep, which is fascinating. Again, could you imagine? That's why there was nothing that existed before. I mean, there really wasn't any. There was no shape that was a chisel, and so that's really the reason why it worked. There was just nothing that was shaped just quite like that. But I mean, imagine the nightmare if someone tried to go and patent a Churchill shape and size. Now, it's not the size; it's just the physical top of the shape. So it's that head, it's that finish, it's the way it's finished. So it's nothing to do with the rest of the cigar, nothing to do with the ring gauge, nothing to do with the length. It's literally just the way the top is finished. So that's where, like with a Churchill is a traditional size and shape, which over the years, hundreds of 100 years at least, was advertised and promoted as a size and a shape, not a trademark or not a business mark of any specific brand per se. So like if you go back and look at real traditional Cuban sizes, like the an A size is usually a 9x48, like a long Churchill. That word A hasn't really been trademarked in regards to the actual shapes. You can call it that because there's 100 years worth of information of multiple people using it, and you would have a hard time trademarking a letter unless it was part of a logo.
I think the patent works by the first person who uses it, not actually registers it. And then also it expires after a certain number of years, if I'm correct.
You do have to, it's the same with trademarks. You have to renew them and show how it's used in the market. So there are expirations. You can renew it. And I don't know how it necessarily works fully with patents and what the time frame and how many times you can renew. For example, with a trademark, which is unique, we had a trademark issue with the original NFT concept. It was called the Golden Bull, which is an actual trademark name that's actively in use. So that was, redesigned and changed because of that, to avoid any issues. And the people that own that was a place called Racine and Laramie in San Diego. They've been in business since like the early 1800s. So they're good friends of ours, and they brought it up and said, absolutely, no problem at all. we're certainly the first people to respect that type of situation. But trademarks can expire if it's not physically active and in use. And I believe trademarks are every 7 years, depending on what industry it's in and what it's being utilized for. Patents tend to operate a little different, and I'm not fully sure, exactly how ours is. But as of right now, we're still, we still have the patent right on that. Question was asked, why not license it? If you license it, then you're leaving the opportunity for then other people to make it, and you would license, and people would pay a fee essentially based off of what you sell. Our unique concept of having the patent was to make it something exclusive for us and special just for us.
Oh, many thanks for the question there. John, it kind of brought me back to what we were discussing earlier regarding the business side of things. I'm not sure if licensing or in this case patenting and trademarks also falls under your duties, but going back to that business aspect yet again, where do you feel that the industry, even though we all love the traditional romantic side of things and that it works old-fashioned in a certain way, where do you think the industry could or should improve in those regards? Where do you see that an impact could be made, and probably with you setting such a stellar example?
I think one of the strengths of the business is that when there is innovation or modernization of the industry, is that it still sticks to the roots of what the industry was founded on. If anyone has ever seen videos from box factories, these boxes are still handmade. Now there's machines that are assisting, but these things are still handmade. And I think Michael Herklotz was one that posted one of the best videos of it. And Christian Aroa just posted a video recently in this box factory that I thought was fascinating. But they showed the process of like the hand laying of the screws on the hinges. There's machinery that can do that, but the fact of maintaining the handmade side of it, as there is innovation and modernization, I think is what keeps this such a romantic industry. If you go down to a factory and everything's automated, it's fascinating if you're interested in technology, but it'd be like going to a restaurant and having a robot cook your meal. It's not the same thing, and it doesn't have that same, as you said, elegance to it. So I would say, going forward, it's important for the industry, I think, to maintain that. But at the same time, there are challenges. There's a lot of challenges with box making in a lot of countries. And Nicaragua had a major concern with that. There was a shortage of wood, and then once there was an excess of wood or availability of it, there was a shortage of labor. Nicaragua has a major concern right now with labor. The Dominican and all the the cigar manufacturing countries are experiencing labor concerns, and but as you create modern solutions to modern problems, I think one of the most important aspects will be to maintain that handmade side of it. And I think what you're going to see is more traditional cigar manufacturers are going to start experiencing significant growth and recognition over the next 5 to 10 years. We're exiting a time of one of the largest growth in the premium cigar industry in the history of this industry. Example, in the United States in the last 3 years, the imports into the country grew by over 100 million units, which is amazing. And that growth's not maintainable at that percentage. There's going to be a slight retraction. I don't think it's going to go down to where it was. I think that these numbers are here to stay in a certain range. But when you're in that, we're in a time of where those traditional cigar manufacturers are really going to have a chance to shine. There's big companies that make great cigars. We live in a time where there's phenomenal cigars out there, but the Aroas of the world, the Lido Gomez's of the world, the Padrones, which are a huge staple. You can almost maybe consider them a large company. Fuente, you certainly can, but they're very traditional in the way they do business. Those types of companies are going to have significant growth and exposure, I think, in this period of time as there's slight retraction, as people continue to demand something that's more craft, something that's more traditional, and that's an important aspect for these companies to maintain that. And the reason I brought up those videos of the box factory is that's an example of them recognizing and seeing that that's something that's appreciated.
Excellent point, indeed. We had a question on Facebook. Well, one from Mitchell from Canada. He says hello, and he said he's checking in to ask Carney what pair of Crocs he's wearing today.
So I don't have Crocs on today. I am doing a little bit of housework around the house today. My wife wanted me to replace the soap dish in her shower because it had a little bit of mold on it. So I'm not actively doing that because I now have a gigantic hole in the side of her shower, which is beyond my ability. But I was wearing my construction shoes today, and I have my American Thanksgiving turkey eating running construction shoes on. So this is the orange to warn everybody I was doing bathroom work, and no Crocs today.
That's brilliant. Well, speaking of art, Patricia, she had also a question for you regarding the art ideas for the Unico. So maybe you can go into that. And to Patricia, hi to you, all the very best, and thanks for chiming in. Speaking of art.
So there's a lot of artistic projects that we've been working on over the last, I would say, there's always been a good amount of art included in what we're doing. Lito's big into art, but his son Tony's really into it. And I would say the Solomon Unicos, which are, for those that aren't familiar with it, are a 10-count box of Solomon-shaped cigars. They're 64 ring gauge figurado. They go from 64 to 54 ring gauge, and quite a big cigar, about 6.5 to 7 inches long. And it was a limited edition product that we made starting in the mid 2000s, 2008 or 9, that we had released, and they were with natural wrappers and Maduro wrappers. So the Unico series was a line of artistic cigars that use tobacco art. So there are different designs on them, circles. We've had Santa Clauses, you name it, we put them on the cigars. But the Unicos are a 10-count box, and every single box has a unique, different set of designs. There may be one cigar that repeats, but no box is identical to the other. So they're all individually unique pieces, hence the name Unico. And that was born, I say, right around the same time that we really elevated how we started focusing on art at the company in general. And for example, we have a series of canvas artwork that Tony developed that's on our website at lfdshop.com. He's developed about 20 different pieces of art that go with those canvases, and they rotate on from different times. There's some new ones that are going to be coming out at a point this year. Artistically, Lito started making these beautiful ashtrays with this company he started called Astronomy, which we've slowly been talking about over the years. And some people may have seen some that have been posted online recently that have M&Ms floating inside of them, which is really unique. And there's numerous different designs. And I would say one of the more fun pieces, which I don't know has ever been mentioned publicly other than probably in person, is that Tony and Lito have been working on this essentially tabletop coffee art book that has all of our products featured in artistic situations. For example, Double E Hero, the Double E Hero digger is the spires for the Brooklyn Bridge. And there's endless amounts of unique things that they've been working on with that. And that's been a project that's been in the works for about 5 years. COVID really kind of changed our focus on that because the availability of time that we had and other things became a focus. But yeah, that Unico really took our focus on art and building that into our projects and building that into the brand to a different level. But it's always been a part of what we've done. In 2008, I believe 8 or 9, there was a project that we did called the El Museo, which was the museum essentially. And that was a piece of box art. There was art developed by this Cuban designer Coincidentally, I believe he's passed away, but I believe it was his wife that was designed the artwork. She was a clothing designer, and that was one of the first cigars that was sold in some department stores in New York City, and that's become a really sought after artistic piece. So it's always been a little bit of what we've done, and it's been at the heart of Lito's spirit and his wife's spirit, and it's just kind of elevated over the years, and the best is yet to come.
Very cool. Another topic that we often discuss here on the show, and it goes back again a little bit to the business aspect of things, and what you just touched base on with the artistic side of things, and that's the portfolio that you have in the brand of various different lines. There's different ways to go about this, and obviously there's some who keep a rather clear and concise portfolio of a couple of core brands, whereas with other companies you just get lost in the magnitude of the number of not only Vitolas but sub brands and 375 different SKUs flying around. How do you think about that, and what is the LFD strategy to create a portfolio that is well understandable for both the retailers and the consumers, but at the same time gives you enough of that flexibility to express your creative and artistic nature?
I think we've been really fortunate, and I don't, part of it's by design, and I think part of it you fall into. We're fortunate to have a brand and a line like Double Ligero, which is a staple. And I always say, if you do something consistently for a period of time and then it works out, it makes it seem like you had that plan all along. That wasn't the first line of cigars that Lito ever made. He started making very mild cigars back in the early 90s. And then Double Ligero came along in the early 2000s. So to go from making mild cigars to fuller bodied cigars and then have that product become the staple of what you do. I mean, we have nearly 20 SKUs in that Double Ligero line. And if, in a business classification, Double Ligero would be classified as a cash cow, essentially. You've gone above that star level. It's really, a significant portion of what we do. So we're fortunate to have that. Like I said, part of it was by design, but I think a lot of that was a byproduct of the goal of making it as consistent as possible, as that was growing over the years. For someone that smokes Double Ligero 700, which is our top selling SKU, that cigar has been almost identical for 15 years. So that's an important side of it. And that's allowed us to focus on developing another side of our business, which has been limited production items. Now, I'm not saying limited edition where there's 500 boxes made and then that's it. But limited production items where we can get creative on the design concepts of the product itself and then get creative with the tobaccos we use. So that's allowed us, when you're not chasing a core line or you're not constantly chasing 20 or 30% of your business, and trying to build that. So if you were to lose 30% of your business because you had to come up with something new each year to compensate for that 30%, that's very challenging. So if you can take that and you have that percentage and that staple and it slowly grows and, goes up or goes down in a certain range, it really allows you to spend the time focusing on and building, items that are more, a little more creative packaging wise, design wise, artistically, and the same with the actual cigar itself. You can focus on that. There's a lot of brands out there that are very limited production and limited edition driven. I'll tell you, there's not enough tobacco in the world to have 20 new limited editions every year for every company. That's just not possible. There's not enough time for it. There's not enough unique blends year to year and aging of tobaccos to do projects like that. It doesn't mean it's negative, but that's a view that I have on a business side of you're constantly trying to maintain what's new, what's next. But if you have a strong core line, you can really focus on not only what's new, but what's creative. And then our limited production items, which I think this is what gives me affirmation on it, is there's a large amount of I'd say I probably have 10 to 15 limited production type items. Lennox, Chapter 1, Chapter 2, our La Volcata. And I think a lot of people are surprised when I say that's a limited production item. We make as much as we can because a lot of people think of that as really core line for us. And the reason why is because we haven't had to recreate those or move on from them. We've been able to give them the attention that they deserve and have them become real staples of our representation and presentation of our products.
I think that distinction that you made there is super important and one that not many people think about between a one-off where you do one run with a particularly limited tobacco or something you just don't have enough of, whereas others where you do a limited production and you just have a finite amount of product that you can come out with for a year, but you keep it in rotation and you keep managing that. And I understand. Well, it's very tempting to do those one-offs where you've got this great bale of tobacco and you want to do something special with it, but it's very uncertain as to whether you're going to have something afterwards, right, to follow up. Do you think in a lot of instances that's just marketing and window dressing and trying to get something out quickly and put a nice little ribbon and story behind and on top of it and move on?
Yeah, certainly. I think it is. Now we're also blessed as I'll step into the consumer side for a little bit. We're blessed as a consumer that when those types of projects happen in this industry, that they're good cigars. It's not like they're let's talk old French cuisine. The French had great sauces over the years because their food used to be rotten. The sauces had to be delicious. It was high in acid and butter. When you put acid and butter on a dish and make a great sauce, it really elevates the dish. We're not in that stage where those projects are not performing as a product. It's just the brand itself or the concept behind it is hey, we're going to dress this up, we're going to tweak this, we're going to work on this, and then it's going to be something different slightly. But I mean, really, if you're working with the same exact tobaccos or you're just adding slightly different tobaccos or slightly changing the recipe, yeah, there'll be different performances, but it's subtle. But I would certainly say I read something the other day. There was something like 360 brand new SKUs that came out, new released products last year at the PCA show. It might be larger. I mean, how is that possible? Where did you discover this rare Connecticut shade tobacco that nobody else in the industry found? You happened to find it. So that's just not a reality. It's not a negative thing, and it could be viewed as negative. It's not a negative situation to me, because at least the product does withstand that. And they said we're blessed in a time where I mean, there's really not, even if the cigars, I'll go on the lounge and people say, "Ah, man, that cigar sucks." And I'm like, well, what sucks about it? They're like, well, I didn't like the taste, or I didn't like this. Well, how did it burn? Oh, it burned fine. The performance, burned fine. The draw was nice. Well, you just didn't like the flavor profile. Let's find you something different. There's a cigar for everyone. And there's very few and far between, if any. I don't remember the last time I smoked a bad cigar. I remember when I smoked something I didn't personally enjoy, but I viewed it as something that was, it was still, if you like that flavor, it was worth the money that you would spend on it. And they say we're blessed by that. But yeah, certainly there's a lot of window dressing going on. But fortunately, on a consumer basis, we're blessed with great products, especially products that get classified as new world cigars. I mean, there's nothing coming out that's not working, because if it does come out and it doesn't work, trust me, it is not around very long.
Over to Ian, or another question. Ian, please chime in.
Hi, John. Good to see you, and I'm really enjoying the show. And my brother lives in Florida near Edgewater, so not too far from where you are. And I'd love, next time I'm over there, I'll try and come over to your part of the world.
Please.
I love the Andalusian Bull when I can get it. And I was going to ask, can you show us some of your whiskey collection? Because I can see, I think you've got the Valvini there and some other nice ones. And perhaps tell us a bit about whiskeys and what you like and what goes well with your cigars.
So this is actually not my independent whiskey collection. However, I do spend a lot of time here, and I do have a lot of certain whiskeys here. There's actually one that I'm going to show you. We actually worked with Cigars on the Avenue to develop a drink menu called the Golden Menu, and those are cocktails that are made to be paired with the Golden Lucky Number 7 cigar from the NFT here. And personally, my favorite pairing with cigars is anything that has a slight acidity to it, because I'm looking for a palate cleanser. I enjoy coffee a ton. Strangely, I think some people smile at this and they may agree. Diet Coke is not a bad palate cleanser if you're looking for something non-alcoholic to go with it, as well as sparkling water is great. But in terms of whiskeys, let me show you one that we actually are pairing with. That we were actually pairing with one of the drinks that we have here. My favorite scotches are the Macallan. I'm a huge fan of Macallan. I'm not a big fan of peaty scotches. The reason why, especially for me with cigars, I really prefer contrasting flavor profiles. Peat's a real earth. Now, peat has, there's no cigars that really have a peat taste to it, but I feel that peaty scotches have more of a comparison profile when you're pairing with cigars than a contrasting profile. And the reason I want contrasting is I want to taste the beverage I'm drinking separately. I want it to cleanse my palate, and then I can taste the cigar separately. But this is one that we're pairing. We have an old-fashioned cocktail we're making here, and this is called Bacta. This is an Armagnac, which is brandy. And this is called the 2707. And this was a barrel pick that they did here. And this Bacta is actually going to go in a coffee cocktail. It's going to be a cappuccino. I had a big influence on the cocktail menu because they asked me what I liked the same way that you just asked. So there's 3 cocktails on there that I'm fond of. The first one's an old fashioned that's going to be made with the Armagnac. I'm a huge fan of old fashions. It's a massive palate cleanser. Not too sweet though. Sometimes old fashions get made a little too sweet. So Tristan. And then there's a coffee cocktail that we're working on, which is going to be made with the Armagnac as well. That is, it's coffee infused froth. The froth is actually going to be infused with bitters, and then the Bacta is poured in there, and it's a delicious cocktail. So for me, I said coffee drinks. Macallan is probably my go-to liquor. For Lito, he's a huge rum drinker. If you've been on here with Lito, he's a massive rum drinker. He really embraces the sweeter side of pairings, whereas I tend to go a little more moderate. I'm a little more in between. On a scale of 1 being dry to 10 being sweet, I'm more of a 5 on that. But I also tend to drink a lot of wine, which I personally, to be honest, don't think wine pairs that well with cigars. I just really personally enjoy wine. Port wines, I tend to think go really well with cigars. That's the sweetness level. But if you ever see me, people ask me, I'll be sitting drinking some wine, and they're like, "Oh, it's interesting that you drink wine. That must be a great pairing." They're like, "Why do you do that?" And I was like, "Because I just am addicted to wine." And I'm like, for me personally, I drink real dry wine. Doesn't really enhance the cigar smoking experience for me. But I do personally really enjoy wine. But when I jump around, if I do Scotch, Macallan, anything without peat, I'm a fan of.
Well, I'm drinking Kalila, which has got a little bit of peat, and if you haven't had that, it's well worth trying. So it's not as peaty as some of the Lagavulins and the Lafroigs as well, but I'm really enjoying that. I've got an EP Carrillo here, and I'm enjoying that with that. And I also like red wine. I think a robust red wine, something from the Rhone or a Zinfandel can also go well with a cigar. But I also love port. Sweetness with port. Sweetness with cigars is great.
We did a port pairing about 2 months ago, and the gentleman, it was actually here, the gentleman that does the pairings, he does one every Monday, and we do one with him once a month because I'm down the street. And he's like, "What do you want to do?" So we did our Cameroon cabinet cigar, which I'm a big fan of Cameroon tobacco. It's very nutty. And we use authentic Cameroon. And I said, you know what? I go, he calls it the barrel, leaf and barrel pairing. And I said, why don't we do, and Steve, yeah, champagne is a great pairing with most cigars, acidic and effervescent. We did a port pairing, and it was actually the most successful pairing that he did because not a lot of people, all the people that were participating were doing scotches, whiskeys, bourbons over the period of 6 months. So we really changed it up, and we ended up going through like 4 bottles of 4 bottles of port. And there was like 10 of us sitting there drinking it. It was a really different pairing, which I don't think happens all the time. When it's spoken about, people are like, oh yeah, port. I like port. It's good with cigars. But the more common pairings I hear are scotches, whiskeys, bourbons, and things like that. And I think that's one of the main reasons why when we were developing the cocktails with Lucky Number 7 here is that we were looking for something that was a little different, and the Armagnac brought a really different approach to the cocktails and different approach to pairing that we hadn't done before. But I did mark that whiskey down. I'm going to take a look and ask the guys about it. But they've got some great stuff back here. I mean, I'm a huge cigar smoker in general, not just because of LFD. I went to an event that our friend Michael Herklotz had, and he did a pairing with Dalmore. Dalmore was excellent. Man, I really enjoyed that. I had a great time with that one. And oh, you have it? Oh, I have the Bacta. I thought I got some people here watching us, so they're coming in to report on different scotches.
My other recommendation, John, is Frappin Cognac, and they do a nice cigar cognac. So if you haven't had that, Frappin, it's a smaller house in Cognac, but it's really good.
How do you spell that?
Frapin. Frappin.
Excellent. We'll take a look at it with the boys.
Ian, you know, I have a deep love and affinity for cognac since I'm also an official cognac educator for the BNIC. Frappin makes excellent cognac. The one thing that I never really understood is the whole concept of those cigar cognacs, because most of the time they're rather robust and more intense than their normal counterparts. Because it seems like the general conception about doing a pairing with the cigar is to make something that is strong and powerful and can stand up to the cigar, where I think that's counterintuitive, and you should rather be looking for something that is elegant and doesn't have too much acidity or spice in terms of woodiness and tannins, because I find that to sometimes interfere with the cigar experience, where both are somewhat challenging for the palate. Obviously the smoke, but on the other hand, also the wood tannins can become a little bit of a clash with the cigars. And John, I think you should definitely try and explore some sherries from Andalusia, because if you're into port, fortified wines in general, they're fantastic with cigars. And the beauty about sherry is you can go all the way from a bone dry, crisp manzanilla to a succulent, sweet Pedro Jimenez sherry with a lot of sugar. But also because you mentioned Cameroon, sherry with a Cameroon wrapper cigar is absolute deliciousness, because in the sherry you have a lot of those rancillon notes, you get the nuttiness, you get that very elegant notion and the ethereal aftertaste, which I find to just perfectly go along with Cameroon wrapper. So maybe next time when you're smoking the Cameroon cabinet, try it with maybe like an old Palo Cortado or an Oloroso sherry. I'm pretty sure
I'm doing it this weekend.
Let me know how you like it. I'm super curious. Questions from our friends here. Macy, chime in, brother. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Saludos. First of all, it's funny. I actually drink. I stay away from sodas. I make a lot of questionable health decisions, but I don't touch the soda. Except when it's not night times. I got to go non-alcoholic. We can't all be Brian Julian by the pool, in the afternoon. But a Coca-Cola or Pepsi in the afternoon with the cigar, it's so simple, but damn, that really is good. And
it is.
So I couldn't agree with them more. It's funny though. I feel worse drinking the Coca-Cola than I do the rum. And also this talk of Cameroon cabinet. I actually have a Cameroon cabinet Lancero and one of the many secret humidors I have in my office that my wife doesn't allegedly know about. So I think it's meant to be. The discussion of that cigar really is making that intriguing. And finally, before I get to my question, real quick, you talked about Red Lobster and Olive Garden. They were good when we were kids. And I started college in 2003 as well. So we might be, I'm about to turn 38. I don't know. Anyway, so I'd be interested sometime hearing the cigars you smoked back in the 2000s, a little walk down memory, because I bet we smoked a lot of the same ones. But
So yeah.
I was going to say, real quick, if I could, there's a book from someone from up near Maine, Connecticut, Stuart Onan, O''Nan. It's called The Last Night at the Lobster. And it's about a Red Lobster in Connecticut shutting down and the manager is getting demoted to being assistant manager at the Olive Garden. And this book is so good. It's like 150 pages. And I recommend Macy's Book of the Week is Last Night at the Lobster. Just shit hits the fan at the Red Lobster. There's a snowstorm and just, it's amazing. Okay. I also remember we could smoke in restaurants. I couldn't do it. I was a kid, but that must have been amazing. Here's my question. You're obviously with LFD and it's sales driven. My question is focused on your cigar sales expertise as a PhD super fellow in that field. If you were not with LFD, and let's say you had Carney boutique brands, tobacco, you were salesperson or you had your own brand, you didn't have the benefit of being with LFD, no vertical integration, you were, scrappy. What sales philosophy would you embrace, or how would you go about building your brand if you, taking what you know now and your experience, what tips or what do you think you would do if you were in that position in terms of building a brand? Because I guess they all start small.
Great question. So, a few parts. So I'm about to turn 39 in about a month. So in 2003, when I moved down to Florida, they still have smoking and non-smoking down here, and they just passed some legislation in the city of Orlando to get rid of it. So I moved down here in August of 2003, and then in like September, went and smoking or non-smoking. I didn't have a car to get around, so it didn't matter. But I always thought that was unique. It was something stuck in my head that because in Maine it went away in the mid to late 90s, and around the same time that the Red Lobsters left New England too. They're up in Maine, in Portland, Maine, of all places, which is right on the water. They had a Red Lobster in Portland, which made 0 sense whatsoever, because every restaurant was seafood. And the funny thing is, here's the reason why I use Red Lobster and Olive Garden as an example a lot. I was a manager for Olive Garden for 2.5 years right out of college. So I worked for Disney World for 3 years, which was my longest job until I started working for LFD. But then I worked for Darden Restaurants for 2.5 years. And then I worked for Universal Studios for their hotel company named Lowe's for about 2 years. When I was in grad school, I was a cabana boy for a bit. Good tips. I was real good looking then too, so that made a big difference. But the cigars that I started smoking, probably CAO was the hottest brand. Don Patel's here, the proprietor. This is his whiskey collection. That's Don. He's the owner of number 7. This is lucky number 7 right here.
Very, very special.
So CAO.
I hope you make a lot of money.
Yeah, they said they hope. They said they
Yeah,
hope
you already made your money. You don't own it anymore.
Oh, it's a cigar consumers and enthusiasts around the world, actually. No, he hasn't started making the money yet. He's just got the display out there, which we'll show you in a little bit. It's beautiful. But yeah, in 2003, man, CAO was king. They were huge, man. They're massive. When you walked into any store, there was 30, 40 facings. It's really kind of what here domestically, at least, what Perdomo's like. Perdomo, Oliva, I mean, those are massive presence in a humidor. Um, Fuentes obviously got a massive presence. General Altovas, but every single humidor you walked into had CAO. So that's what I was born on smoking. And then we started smoking CAO flavors. That was the gateway for us. We smoked those. My first week of college, one of my best friends got me into cigars, and then the sky was the limit with that. And the reason why we got into it was because we wanted the time to sit down and have conversation that wasn't like the normal conversations that we were having. We were like, let's go have a cigar. And then the people that would come and get interested in us would have different conversations than just the normal college conversation. And then it grew over the years. But to ask your specific question, personally, I have absolutely zero desire to ever own my own cigar company. I'm in a very unique spot where I'm in a company that is very family driven. The next generation's involved in the business. And I joke around that, that I'm like the referee between the next generation and the future. And they keep me grounded too. But I don't have a desire to do that. If I were to get into something else in the future, it'd probably be restaurant driven, which is absolutely insane. So I won't do that. That's one of the hardest careers to be in. Renard and I are very blessed to not fully be in that industry any longer, and be on a more a side of hospitality that's a little more conducive to a better lifestyle and the enjoyment of it than the hard work that goes in from proprietors. I mean, that's a very tough way to make a living. Very, very successful. You can be very successful and rewarding, but it's tough. I watched my dad sacrifice, 35, 40 years of his life doing it for us. But my recommendation to someone that would be starting their own brand is to be very, very involved with your manufacturing partner if you're not the manufacturer. It's very hard to start your own manufacturing facility and scale it to a point where you could grow that company and maintain consistency. So be very, very involved with the manufacturing side of it. And again, I'll use Michael Herklutz again as an example, not just because he's a friend of mine, and a friend of the family and the industry. I think that's one of the biggest impacts that he's had with his brand, and as he's growing it, is that connection to the manufacturing side of it, almost to the point where he seems to almost have more of a connection to the manufacturing side of it than the actual manufacturer who's manufacturing the product. It kind of appears that way, right? And I think the brands that have been successful create that environment where they have that connection and that dedication to the manufacturing side of it. Steve Saka is another example of that. Skip Martin is an example of a person who actually created his own manufacturing facility. But if you're going to be successful long-term and scalable on a non-just regional level, you've got to have those relationships, and you've got to know what's going on the manufacturing level on a week-to-week and almost day-to-day basis and have that relationship.
Very cool point. Many thanks for the question. And John, very interesting answer. I really, really appreciate that. Riot, over to you. Over to Dubai.
Hello, John. How are you?
Good day. I just watched you on Instagram today.
How's it going? All good. We just received our shipment today. I'm very excited. And
was that your first?
Oh, no. That's probably our fifth or something like that.
Oh, great.
Yeah. We've been carrying LFDs for almost 3 years now, and we love them, and we've created a lot of following for them. And I'm a big fan. I mean, give me any LFD cigar, I'd love to smoke it and enjoy it. But the question I have for you is a very simple question, and I smoke a lot of the Maduro Cabinet 5 and 6. I absolutely love those. And considering what's happening in the market, it takes a lot of, permission to speak freely, it takes a lot of balls for a brand to issue a cigar with no ring. I know this has been the tradition and the trend 10, 15 years ago. You used to buy the punch double Corona and all of that stuff without a ring in the cabinet format or in the cabinet box. But what is the logic for LFD to doing so?
That's a great question. And it's funny you asked that, because
I'll tell you why I'm asking you that. I'll tell you a funny story, and I apologize for cutting you off.
No, go ahead.
In our part of the world, people have an obsession with custom cigars.
Mm-hmm.
So we did an experiment at the shop that was really funny, where we sold the cabinets in the box at X, and then we took up like 10 of them, put them on the side in a separate tray, and put the price at 2X. The 2X sold like this. It's really funny.
So how that was born was, it's a fuller bodied offering. It's very rich. It's Maduro wrapper, Maduro binder, very rich, full bodied tobaccos inside as well. So it burns very smooth, very cool. It's clean on the palate, but it's at the same time, it's still full bodied. You know you're smoking something that's got some strength to it. So that falls under the category of a limited production, which we were talking about earlier, where this is going to be a fun limited production product. It might even say limited edition on the side. I think it says limited production. It's become such a staple for us that I it's like you walk into your business on a regular basis, and there's little things that you don't see anymore, and somebody walks in and says, "Oh, that's not right," or "Oh, hey, that's unique," and you don't even think of it. Artwork, you may have on the wall at your house, same type of thing. And that cigar, when it came out probably 13, 14 years ago, we came out with it, no band, and this is a traditional cabinet style of presenting a cigar. And it started to be successful. And this where it goes along. At the same time, we had this very strong core line. So the places that it was successful at started to have, reorders on it. Hey, this is doing well. People really like it. And then you started to grow it out around the places that had that product, and there started to become knowledge about it. And then a lot of people didn't really know what it was. They don't know what's LFD. A lot of people just call them the Maduro 5s, the Maduro 6s. Then it slowly grew and became a staple. And then it got to the point where this is so good, why don't you put a band on it? Then it got to the point where people are like, I'm glad you don't have a band on this, because some people buy based off of a band, or they buy off the way that it looks. And this has started kind of a little bit of a cult following that grew into a situation of, as I said, it became a product that people were just calling by the brand of the cigar. You have the number 5, you have the number 6. And I'll tell you, if we put a band on it now, the people that smoke it, I think would say, what did you do? You changed this. So it's sticking to something that worked. And that's a testament to what we were talking about earlier, is when you can focus on a product like that, and you're not caught up on just overproducing or producing more and more of it when you're trying to grab something that's going to stick. If you create something like that, it ends up naturally sticking and becomes an integral part, and almost a necessity to the people that enjoy that product. It's something that if they smoke 10 different cigars a week, it's, one of the 10, and it's like clockwork. And as you said, it's, I think the people that smoke it like the fact that there's not a band on it. They're grabbing it. It feels special grabbing it. And then when they smoke it, they understand that it is something special at the same time. So it's, it's proud to watch that grow. And that's a perfect example, I said, of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for this. To answer Macy, yes, I did disclose. And I'm like, this cigar is the same as that cigar. It doesn't have a band. And you're getting it at half the price that was written over there. So no, we did not sell it at double the price. But it was just an experiment that we did. And yeah, you're right. People call them Maduro 5s and Maduro 6s. And before we used to put them in trays. Now we make it a point to refill the box itself for people to realize that it's an LFD. I mean, it isn't the LFD section. But yeah, but amazing. Even the Oscuros.
We had in probably 2008 or 9, when the Cameroon cabinet line came out, we had a retailer in New York City. And I think he's been on the show, and I think he might have just been in your store recently. Aaron Sigmund used to run the store.
Of course.
So Sig loved Cameroon. So he was at this retail store, and if people know Sig's career, they can guess the retail store. So he bought like 50 boxes of each SKU. Shortly after, about a year or so, he moved on to a different part of the part of his career. So I walked into this retailer on my first week of the job, and they have these Cameroons everywhere. And they're like, we have all these Cameroons. The business had transitioned to a different leadership, and They're like, what can we do with these? And I'm like, they're a great cigar. And he's like, well, I've got an idea. He's, I'm going to bring my sales staff in, all of them, on the trade, on the not trade show floor, on the retail floor. And next week I'm going to feature the cigar. He goes, but I'm going to take the bands off. And I'm like, excellent. Like, let me know how it works out. So all that sales staff had been there for the most part over the period of 2 years that the Cameroon had been there. And sometimes you get caught when there's just a band on the cigar that cigar has got to sell itself, right? And people are label shopping or whatnot. So they sampled that cigar and said, hey, everyone, I want you to try this new cigar we're working on for the store, and I want your opinion. So everybody came back and said, this is one of the more full-bodied Cameroons we've ever smoked. It was excellent. This is great. You know, what's the branding of this going to be? What's the concept with it? And he said, the concept is this is LFD Cameroon cabinet, and they're on the shelves, and you guys should be selling these things. And they were all like, oh, gosh, that's embarrassing. And it became one of the top selling SKUs that they had in the store. And obviously they didn't replace it with that deep on it, but it became a staple of what was in the store. And that's a testament to as I said, of building it, taking away preconceived notions. And that's really what's built that Maduro cabinet number 6 and number 5. It's authentically based off of what people, how the consumer enjoys that product.
That's an amazing story. The logic and the science of how your clients think and their perception and how they see things is just an amazing science and even art as you see how what makes them tick. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Very, very interesting question and super cool stories, John. I'm so much enjoying the show today. It's fascinating, truly. And what I always love is we try to bring people from different parts of the industry with different perspectives. You know, not just the brand owners and the master blenders, but looking at the entire ecosystem from different angles. And I mean, you're one of the most respected ambassadors for cigar culture in the US, I believe, and one of the truly great brand representatives out there. So what an amazing show. I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
It comes from heart, and I mean it as I say it. Over to Brian, who now calls himself Simon. So, John, you managed to get that right at least.
Yeah. I just had a quick follow-up going back to the conversation where we were talking about sherries and whiskeys and ports and things. What are your thoughts on cigars aged in like whiskey barrels and things like that? Are you a fan? What do you think it adds? A lot, not so much? Does LFD have plans for this in the future?
So I'm assuming you're asking in the like in the production process. Yeah, so it's fascinating to me. You know what's really fascinating to me is that when it's overtly explained. So La Aurora came out with this cigar. It was called the Barrel Aged. I mean, years ago, and it was heavily explained, barrel aged, and I think it might have been a little bit before its time in terms of marketing, essentially that way. And I don't know how well it did for them. From my experiences, it wasn't one of their huge successes on a consumer level. You know, there's different success. There's us selling a cigar to someone and then buying a lot of it, and then it actually successfully being purchased by consumers, you know, not being discounted or, you know, not being a problem and becoming a liability rather than just an asset. So the barrel aging is going to give you a ton of different unique flavors to it. It's going to give you a characteristic. I think Nick Perdomo finishes a lot of his products in barrels, and I don't know if that happens in the tobacco aging process or if it happens in the once the cigar is made, it rests in that type of occasion. Now, I've had some cigars that are aged in these barrels post production, which I find really cool and fascinating. I think it's really fun when people take a cigar and then I got a barrel and I'm gonna age it in this. And it tends to be when that happens that it's aged in a barrel that's relatively new. So I don't know, have you ever opened up an empty barrel that just had liquor emptied out of it? It's almost overwhelming when you open it up and take a sniff. The first time I ever did it, I opened it up and stuck my head right in the barrel and nearly passed out. because it was just so much alcohol sent. It was overwhelming. But yeah, barrel aging. I think I think another concept that's unique is aging in different kinds of wood. Spanish cedar has been the most popular. Most resting rooms are Spanish cedar. But I would think something fun would be to age different tobaccos in different kinds of wood. Aging them in mahogany or aging them in something different would be unique in the production process. Barrel aging gives it just a lot of richness, a lot of controlled humidity in there. Where you're controlling the humidity, controlling the climate, you're going to get a lot of unique richness to it. And I think in the past that it's been seen more as a marketing concept rather than a benefit to the product. But I think it does have significant benefits and really change the characteristic of it. And I think there's more of it happening now than what we are specifically told. And then sometimes when it's mentioned, as I said, that's why I don't know exactly what part of the process in Nick's process that he does it, because it's part of a 200-step process, that's in place. So it's I think it happens more than what we know. And I think it does have a lot of characteristics, from that aging process can be controlled simply because of the controlled environment that it's in.
Great, thanks. Cheers.
John, I believe you wanted to chime in on the conversation there.
Yeah, just a quick question, John. Good to see you, fella.
Likewise, my friend.
So yeah, like yourself, I come from a hospitality background before I joined Tor, and not naming obviously the other company, but I see you have a cigar company who every so often every year teams up with chefs. I always think that if I were to make a cigar with chefs, and I always go through the different chefs who I'd like to work with, who would you, LFD, we're going to make a cigar with chefs, what chefs would you like to work with?
So I'll mention the company. It's Davidoff. It's excellent. I love the Chef's Edition. I think that's one of the coolest limited editions out there, especially for anyone that has any type of hospitality background or Epicurean type focus and enjoyment. I buy it every year. Every year I say I'm just going to buy one or two. So what I do is I buy one or two every week, and then I end up getting towards I have 2 boxes that I've gone through, and then I'm like, I'll just buy a box next year, or I should buy a box, and then they're out of stock and I got to make phone calls. I just love that concept of it, whether it hits your palate or not. For me, the effort that goes into that and the unique side of it is really unique. And for me personally, one of my favorite chefs, because I love, when I cook, I love fire, I love flames. And if anybody is familiar with chefs that love open fire and open flames, it gets whittled down to one specifically, Francis Mallman. He's fascinating. If you ever have a chance to watch any of his presentations, master classes, I can't remember the company that he's working with now to do his instructional class, but his palate for food is the way that I like food. Especially meats. I love char. I love open flame hitting animal flesh, I guess, for lack of a better term. For any vegetarians, I'm sorry, that was pretty graphic. My wife's vegetarian, so when I talk about that she's like, that's so awful. But it's delicious. But no, I think John, he's a fascinating chef.
I just wanted to say that there is an episode of The Chef's Table on Netflix with that chef that's very good.
Mm. Yeah, he's excellent, and he's got a real flavor for life. He says there's 2 loves of his life that he's never slept with, and that one of them is the city of Paris, and the second one is potatoes. And so he's fascinating. He's got a flavor for life and really robust, robust personality. And I think if I went to Lido and said, "Hey, I ran into Francis Mallman, and he's interested in developing something special," he would. I don't know if we would make it. We don't traditionally do projects like that, but I know we'd certainly sit down and we'd have him down and we'd have some food and we'd flatter it for a while.
Very cool. Excellent question, John. Superb. Now we obviously have to talk about the elephant in the room, and then talk a little bit about the Golden Bull NFT. I want to look at it differently though, John, because a lot has been said and done about it. I'm sure in every interview and every podcast that you did, you were asked pretty much the same questions about the LFD Bull NFT. That's actually difficult to pronounce, like LFD NFT. Too many little siblings there.
Yeah, we'll just call it the Golden LFT. Golden. See, it's tough. Golden NFT.
Well, there you go. So it's been a little bit since the NFT was released. I believe it was in August, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a little bit of a time span in between. And you mentioned for the number 7, you just had some recent deliveries. In retrospect now, or I mean, along the process, I should rather say now, how do you look at it compared to the initial conception of the product and when you launched this whole thing?
So this process was a several-year process. I mean, I remember when Tony developed this and presented it to his dad, but I remember the day that he approached me with it and he says, I'm thinking about this concept, and we were talking about NFTs. And the first comment that I made was the same comment that people made to me or that I saw online when this was announced. The biggest level of dissension towards this is just digital art. And I said to him, I said, this is digital art. I'm like, what's the value in it? I go, we're not famous artists. You're not a famous artist. Hopefully you become one, but if you don't, what's the draw behind this? We're not world-renowned celebrities. LFD is known in the cigar industry, but this is going to have some larger appeal, right? If you're just going to do digital art. And he's like, no. He goes, the technology is what I'm talking about. The technology allows for a level of authentication that's unparalleled by anything. So if we were to buy some fine art, if I own the Mona Lisa and were to sell it to you, there's a series of paperwork that goes on to authenticate that. And this process, when you utilize the blockchain, and for our instance, Ethereum, which is kind of positioning itself as the leader in the authentication side, not just cryptocurrency, as we're seeing some crypto exchanges, collapse, the ones that were kind of run as Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes with unlimited amounts of coining, essentially. Ethereum kind of separated itself, and the technology is what was the unique side. And I said, man, that's genius. I go, you could create a product that has digital art that's a contract that the owners could immediately authenticate with any person in the world, and any person at any given period of time could even put an offer in. You could put a QR code. They have a QR code that's going to be going on their humidors out here. Somebody could scan it, see that it's authentic, see who owns it, see where you got it from. If you're on a tertiary, a third market or a secondary market, and authenticate that product instantly, and that it's authentic. So that technology was unique. And then at the same time, the reason that it was special and why not just throwing an NFT out there would be successful long term is it was with a product that had a significant amount of demand and pomp and circumstance still around it in the 6.5, 7 years that it's been out. And then you add the limited nature of it to the owners, and the sky's the limit was what the opportunities might have been and are currently the ability to have. So you're putting something that's truly limited at a very low level of production that can also be authenticated. And there's very few things that are of that limited nature at that type of prestige that can be authenticated like that, where you don't have to really be concerned with if it's authentic or not. You look at some of these Cuban cigar auctions that happen around the world, and the amount of paperwork that's going to go in to prove if this cigar is real, if it's been that this is done. So I think you're going to see this technology utilized not just in cigars again, but you're going to see it utilized in auctions. You're going to see it utilized in the title for a car. You're going to see it utilized for the deed on your house. And this technology is going to slowly continue to mature, and Ethereum seems to be the one that's in front of that over the years. But to directly answer the question, looking at where it was at when it went, obviously it exceeded our expectations in terms of the excitement behind it initially. And then the second part of that process is once that excitement was there, it established a very high value. I mean, it was nearly $750,000 that was created for this, and that was part of the purchasing price to have the rights to have these cigars and have that right of refusal on that. So now the important aspect in what I'm finding, and I'm working very closely with the Golden Circle, and there's 7 independent owners around the country, around the world that own these. Coincidentally, they were all here. But managing that product and that luxury good that they now have, and maintaining that with them is such an important aspect of it. I would say that's what caught me off guard the most was, for me personally, is the amount of time, which I really do appreciate this opportunity too, is the amount of time I do spend working with the owners and trying to find the best outlets for them to utilize what they have, whether it's to keep it and create their own collection, whether it is to distribute it to different areas, whether it is to maintain it, and build other programs around it. It said, for example, this here is a program, and I'm working with one of the owners as well. For those that are in Dubai, you've seen that one of the owners is working with them in Dubai, which is a great concept to distribute them to an area that's only going to help and improve the excitement behind it. But for here example, they're working on this golden menu. This is the golden menu that has drinks that are around with it, and they're also working on essentially an appointed merchant program, where there'll be a very small select group of merchants around the country or around the world. It could be anywhere that's interested in carrying these. There's a special display that comes along with it, and it will tell the story. They will also carry the golden menu, which will continue to allow people to experience these types of things, not just here, so they can participate in it. So there's a number of things, but I'd say the biggest surprise for me is was the amount of communication that has gone on from the owners when they got it. We have this, how do you think we should treat it? I talked to the gentleman who bought number 1 and 2. I talked to him, multiple times a week about different concepts, ideas, and that ranges, as I said, anywhere from, hey, hold on to these, or, hey, this is a great place to put it. You have something very unique now, and something very luxurious, and something that has a lot of prestige, and it's important to make sure that product is treated that way. And then we as a manufacturer, and we as the company that's developed this, to maintain that support going forward. It's just as important for us to continue to have this to grow, continue to have the recognition and prestige of it grow, as it is to the owners. It wasn't just a, hey, you got these and now they're yours, go ahead. We're very actively involved day to day with these owners.
It's interesting that you mentioned this aspect, and part of the reason why I framed my question the way I did, you partially answered it when obviously a lot of the people who purchased these really didn't have much of an idea as to what this could evolve into, or how to treat these things. Did you have like a clear idea of how this could pan out in the first place?
I wouldn't necessarily say clear, because you're essentially blazing new trails here,
Uncharted territory,
and paving new roads. So I personally am an idea person. So if you ask me what my thoughts are on anything, I can give you a thought and an idea of how I think it'll work in the premium cigar industry and selling luxury type products. I have experience with that. And then the consumer side of it, with how to present an experience, I would consider myself an expert at that. So I had thoughts and processes of how it would work. It was a little bit surprising. I wouldn't say surprising. I think the biggest challenge I have is this just started in August, right? And the biggest challenge that I think a lot of people have is patience. And it was, the more patient you are, the better and more successful whatever you're trying to do with your ownership is going to be, whether that's keeping it for yourself, to keep and collect, to enjoy on your own, whether it was presenting it to another market, where they could possibly be sold. And I think the important thing at the same time too is this is not a product that you buy just to flip and make money instantly. You know, when these first came out, I'll just be honest, there was one of the owners did a raffle ticket concept, which turned out not to be something they could do, and it wasn't very successful anyway. But it was illegal and it wasn't successful, so they had to stop it. But the challenge with that is luxury products and things that people want to enjoy aren't done on, you know, traditionally done by raffles. You know, when somebody goes to buy, and I'm not saying we're Ferrari, don't take me on that. But when somebody goes to buy a Ferrari, it's not, hey, we're going to sell this Ferrari, and everybody buys a raffle ticket, and then one person will win it. That's not how that type of good is presented. So I'd say the biggest thing that everyone's learned, and the one that I've pushed in the beginning is with the owners, is no matter what you're trying to do, please be patient. Take your time with it. Don't rush into anything. You didn't spend this money to flip it overnight. And if you did, then that's not how this is not going to work for you, and this is not going to be a success. Once you flip it and maybe somebody else own it, they're going to see that. And the way that I look at this is too, you're looking at the price points. These are going from anywhere between $75 up to $300 or $400, and there really hasn't been any price point established. And when there isn't a price point established, it will fluctuate from time to time. This could become something so rare, who knows what the prices go to. But you're seeing the lower end side of the price points. I see those purchased instantly, and then I see them online flipped at like $200-300. So you know, I'm sitting there, I'm looking, somebody's understanding the value of patience along that process. So I talk with our owners and work with them and say, hey, you're right, you have the right to do what you want to do with this product, but my suggestion is to be patient, see what's happening with it, and take advantage of it the best possible way you can, because that's the most fair to yourself, and that's also going to be the most fair to the people that want to enjoy it and be part of it. And I said, here in lucky number 7 at Winter Park at Cigars on the Avenue, they've decided to be violently patient. You know, he's taken from the time that he bought it to the time, I got a cramp here in my leg, sorry. And from the time it's released is going to be about 6 months. And they've developed something that's incredibly unique. The lounge has artwork featuring the golden artwork around the lounge. You know, let me take you on a quick little run outside here, and you can see kind of how their approach has been. And this is really different, but I think you're going to see some more of this. This is Richard. So you can see up here on the wall. So this is their bar area, but you see up on the wall here, you know, they've really embraced this. And then they developed also at the same time, their own display for this product. So you can see here the golden, the NFTs on display at all times. They've got it featured here with Macallan M. This is how they're going to launch their product. 25 VIP guests are going to experience the Macallan M. They're going to experience Wagyu beef and a full Japanese dinner experience. And they have the whole product on display at all times, and it really presents it in a way that's deserving of it. And you know, whatever happens with this is an example of when you take patience, really think something out that you really put together something that's even better than what you expected. And as I said, patience is the key, and that what they've done here is something really special. And honestly, all the owners are. You know, as I said, one of the owners is working with our friends in Dubai, and they have something that's really, really special. And as you're patient, those opportunities come. But patience is the hardest thing, I think, with anything you do, and patience is the hardest thing with anyone, especially when they spent a significant chunk of change to be part of it.
Amen to that. Speaking of patience and time, John, first of all, we want to be respectful of your time, and I so greatly appreciate all the time that you're taking out of your precious day to share all these thoughts and insights with us. And I would love to sort of look into the the bigger picture and the future for the next couple of months, some bold predictions for 2023. You mentioned the state of the industry at the very beginning, and with what you just said about patience and all the things that are beautiful about the cigar industry, with the romantic side and some of the traditional ways of very out of time practices, even for lack of a better word. How do you look at the next couple of months? How do you look at the rest of 2023 panning out, and in 12 months from now, when we sit down again and have a follow-up chat, do you think the industry is going to be in a better place, in a worse place, roughly the same? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think you're going to see some retraction in the industry overall in terms of total consumption. I said that feverish pace that's happened over the last 3 years, which was really a byproduct and a positive note of how consumer decision making, especially with premium cigars, changed because of COVID. You're going to see that stick at a high number because, again, it became, once you start to enjoy premium cigars, enjoy these great experiences, you don't just move away from it. But they're, naturally overall, a large portion of the business is built off of how much can we grow. When you take 50 to 60% of the industry is controlled by, a small group of publicly traded manufacturers and brands, they're going to try to drive the market, and they're trying to grow as much as they can. And when you have some retraction, that's going to be just a natural thing that happens. And if you read some of the reports from these companies, they're already anticipating, some declines on things. Now, that's where I said there's an opportunity for other companies, and where I think traditional manufacturers are going to have a very positive time in the next few years, is they can come in and they're not looking for the biggest piece of the pie. You're just looking to expand slowly, and that's an opportunity to do that. But I don't think retraction is necessarily bad. When you're looking at reports of imports and exports from these cigar growing countries, these cigar manufacturing countries, it's not a bad thing if it's, just flat or slightly down. Now, if it's going on for 10 years and it's a big decline and the industry's growing, then you've got an issue. But, as you grow big, there always has to be some sort of a retraction and some sort of a leveling that really, brings you back to where you really are, and then you can start growing from there again. So I think you're going to see some retraction over the next year, and that's going to be really good for consumers. As you have too much of something from these larger companies, the way to move that is to create, lower price points, and especially the way inflation is going around the world, any type of lower price point on some large demand products is going to be an excellent situation. Looking at brands our size, the demand is exponentially larger than what we produce, even when we do grow. So you're going to see a lot of the same in terms of the actual business growth that we're having. Now, in relation to products, you're going to see a lot of new stuff. This year, you're going to see a lot of new products next year. There's companies our size. For the last 2.5, 3 years, we kind of put everything on hold except our core products because the demand was so high for that. So for this year, for us, we have our Lido Gomez line returning for the first time in 7 years. That's our Dominican Puro wrapper, binder, and filler, all from our farms in the Dominican Republic. That's going to be coming back. Some other unique products are coming. Lido Jr., which I'm smoking now, his first project is just coming onto the market, the Solis, and that's exciting. So the brands that you've seen some challenges in getting products like our size, you're going to see improvement in the availability, and you're going to see new releases again. From the larger companies, you're going to start seeing some more deals, and then you'll just naturally see, and this will be by how the business is reported on, you'll see retraction. It's not something the consumer is going to notice. If you're looking closely, you'll notice, hey, there's a better deal on this, or if I'm participating in this event, this is a little more aggressive of a promotion than it was in the past. But when you read things at the end of the year, you're going to see retraction, and I don't think that's a bad thing. For a stockholder, they may be like, well, we want growth and I'm not getting as big of a return. But then as things normalize, then you start to grow again and see that. So I see where we're headed a positive note. If you average off where we're at over the last 3 to 4 years, if we didn't have this boom, we wouldn't be where we're at now as an industry overall. So I see it as a very positive note, and I think our discussions next year will reflect on those concepts.
Amen to that. If you allow me one little follow-up to that, I believe that perspective is US heavy in terms of the idea and the perception. How do you see it in the international markets? Because the Cuban crisis, the shortage of Cuban cigars in the international markets is not going to go away anytime soon. And I mean, most of the humidors internationally are just empty, at least the shelves where you traditionally find Cuban cigars. And that void will be filled by certain brands who dare to go into the international markets or have always invested in that. On the other hand, it's of course very simple comparatively to play in the US because you don't have to deal with 27 different regulations, warning labels, and all the shenanigans that comes with it. So I see that as a difficult balancing game for most of the manufacturers as to where do you put your chips and how you play this between the US and the international markets.
Yeah, it's interesting because when there was discussion over the last, it's probably 6-7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, when there was some loosening of the enforcement of the embargo restrictions with Cuba in the United States. Cuba was releasing information of, if we could get Cuban cigars into the United States, we control 80% of the market tomorrow. And I think what we're seeing now is that's not true, because they can't handle the growth of where they're at and the demand of where they're at currently for a number of reasons, economically, social concerns in that country and whatnot. They've got a real challenge, and it's the challenge they would experience here if the embargo were to go away. And then you couple it with price increases that they've experienced and implemented in the last year. That market will be filled with these cigars. And I'm saying this is happening uniquely at a time that domestically we're kind of leveled off. And you're going to have this overproduction, or you have an increase in production, or the ability to have an increase in focus international for us. Whereas when the pandemic hit, the majority of the focus was spent where the largest part of your market was here in the United States. You couldn't meet the demand here. So a lot of these companies spent this time trying to meet the demand here, which naturally has put their business in a position where they're going to be able to capitalize on what's going on internationally. And you are going to see a lot of changes with it. It's the interest in other cigars is only going to continue to improve, because we saw that trend anyway. That people ask, like, how would you compete with Cuban cigars if they were here in the United States? Well, all these new world cigars are already competing with them. Now, Cuba had a significant control of that market, but they're going to be giving up a portion of their market without any of their say into it, simply because of supply. So you're going to see that filled with things. You're going to see the focus change. And will they always stay strong? Yes. And will they probably come back? Most likely. And competition's nice, but you're going to certainly see some changes that were already brewing in that international market. And it is a coincidence, but unintentional, that at the same time that you're leveling off here, and it's going to allow us a much more significant focus with that situation too. So it'll be fun to talk about where the international market is in a year and a half in terms of the cigars that we've spoken about today, outside of in relation to Cuban tobacco.
Amen. John, what a pleasure it has been. An incredible 2 hours. Thank you so much for your time, for your generosity, and everything that you shared with us. It's greatly appreciated. As I told you, man, you've got all my respect and appreciation. You're doing an amazing job, and it was a privilege to have you here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. So many thanks, and hopefully we can sit down and share and enjoy a cigar in person super soon.
Certainly, my pleasure. All, I appreciate the time. Certainly enjoy it. Flew by. When you said 2 hours, I had to double check here, but no, I enjoyed it, and we said on behalf of Lito and his wife, Inez, we certainly appreciate the support from everyone and the ability to sit down and and share what they've created over the years. It's certainly something special that I'm glad to be a part of, and great to share that with you all today. Thank you.
Absolutely. John, all the very best to you, to the family, to the entire company, and light them up. We'll see each other soon. Take care, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for today. Bye-bye.
Great show.
Another great one, Reinhard. What a way to kick off the year.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, John.